All right, Bert. Today's program is really centered around headlines and HR in the news. And there is a lot of circumstance where HR ends up in the news or employee relations issues end up in the news. And I want to talk about one with you here. And that's our first headline is the family of a factory worker who died in Hurricane Helene flooding sues and claims that the bosses were able to leave and survive while they made the employees stay and work to meet production demand. So I don't know if you've heard about this one, but the suit claims that workers were forced to stay at the factory despite flood warnings to meet production deadlines while senior management allegedly escaped through the back door. It goes on and it tells just a horrible story about how someone got trapped in flood water and their text back to their daughter was, "I love you," because they were so afraid. And it was the last anyone ever heard of the individual. Now, one reason why I like this particular headline, I don't like the outcome, let's be clear about that, is that we have had some significant hurricanes come through the country recently. It's done some terrible damage. We have tornadoes that enter other parts of our country that do terrible damage. And we've seen even in the Amazon case here in our neighborhood just a few years ago where, the workers were not able to take cover appropriately, and part of the building collapsed and killed several people at an Amazon facility. So these things happen, and basically what happens is we don't have the proper emergency preparedness plan. But first of all, Bert, let me just ask, have you heard about that first headline?
I hadn't until I was prepping for the show today.
Okay, so a horrible situation. There are some things that we could do proactively, and that is developing a comprehensive evacuation plan. We can train our employees and our managements on disaster protocols. And I think the key thing there is that most people are focused on production demands and meeting responsibilities, and sometimes we don't anticipate how bad the weather may get. And it is good to have a set of guidelines that's going to help us through that, because we never know if it's just another over-exaggerated news event or if it's going to be something of significance. And I just told you about a situation where we were in Orlando and we were in the hurricane as it came through Central Florida there. And I just share with you some of the things that we did is, first, once we realized, the hurricane was going to come through our area, we talked together as a team to discuss, what were our options. And everyone that we were there with, it was my leadership team, they all had an option to make any decision that they felt was important to them. They could leave. We didn't have a lot of flight options, but we also were very safe in a high-rise hotel building with, no real severe threat to us. But in that case, the decision we made is we let everyone make that decision on their own. What was best for them? What is their tolerance to the risk based upon the news and what we're hearing? And I thought that was, the right decision for us to make versus me trying to make that decision on their behalf. And we do that same thing when it comes to bad weather. We allow people to, make the decision for themselves as whether or not they think they can or cannot come into work, because we do still encourage people to come into the office on a daily basis. Is there anything else you would add to that, Bert, either proactively or reactively?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Phil, when you said that you have to have emergency or contingency type plans in place, and the time to do those things is before an emergency strikes.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, and hopefully then you don't have to worry about being reactive.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway here is the lack of leadership. That the leaders fled while the subordinate workers were made to come in to work. And I think that if the leaders wanted to get out of town or hunker down wherever they were, that's something that should have been offered to the other employees. I think from a legal perspective, I'm not sure that this suit will actually stick. But if it does, I sure wouldn't want to be in front of a jury with these facts.
Yeah, I mean that one might pull the heartstrings quite a bit, particularly if it is true that the leader said you must stay and hey, we're sneaking out, and doing
Yep.
the backdoor exit. Let's talk about this other one here. How about Meta fires employee making $400,000 per year over a $25 meal voucher? So apparently, the news is the employee allegedly ordered food for his or her friends, I'm not sure, using the voucher, which violated company policy. This incident has sparked discussion about Meta's internal policies and employee conduct, particularly around expense management and ethics. Any thoughts on this one, Bert?
Yeah, I had seen this headline and read an article about it, and I think that it comes down to, Phil. We've always talked in the past about the notions of consistency and fairness, and if they misused a company voucher, that is in essence like a form of theft, and I think that basically that if the company's being consistent and doesn't tolerate theft of company funds or property, then from a consistency standpoint, they probably did what was right. From a fairness standpoint, I'm not so sure, but consistency, which I put above fairness usually, I think that they probably did the correct thing here, even though this is a very harsh result.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of companies, and I've worked for them. I've been part of the policies when it comes to theft, zero tolerance. Doesn't matter how little, what type, what reason necessarily. You're not allowed to steal, and sometimes this is considered a form of stealing or misuse of company property, as you mentioned it. And it's I can see where individuals feel like, oh, that's not fair. It's
Right.
$25. Come on. You're a big corporation, you can afford that. But I mean, at what point is it then not okay? And in that case, I start with $1, and you're not allowed to steal, period, or misuse company money with intent, knowing that you were misusing it. Now, if it was done in mistake, that's different.
Yeah, I think the prudent thing here, and I'm not quite sure what happened, but would be for the company to conduct a very thorough investigation of the incident before making the decision to discipline or terminate. Other things, depending on whether it was some sort of a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of the company's policy on these vouchers, maybe lesser discipline followed by clarification of the policy would have been warranted, but we'll have to see what shakes out with this one if a claim is ultimately brought.
All right, you got time for one more?
Sure, let's do one more, Phil.
All right, so we got one more here. This one involves the NLRB ruling, and apparently a former Starbucks CEO broke labor law, is being claimed, by telling an unhappy employee, go work for another company. Now, the incident occurred in 2022 when an employee raised concerns about unfair labor practices and unionization. Schultz's comments were deemed to um, um, not
Could be
necessarily to
coercive,
yeah, there you go.
threatening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Starbucks disagrees with the ruling, but has stated its commitment to respecting employees' rights to organize. So we've seen a lot about Starbucks in the news. I will tell you, in so many words and in so many ways, encourage people who are not happy in the job that they're in to go and find a job that would make them more happy. We talk about being outrageously engaged here in AIM. And if you're not outrageously engaged, I really don't want you to stay working for us. And I want you to go find a job that's going to make you happy and fulfilled in your day. So this one's interesting to me because we've seen and we hear many bosses say, if you don't like it, you can go work somewhere else.
Well, you just added another word there, Phil, that I think is important. The headline that you keep seeing out there, and the one that you mentioned is that the CEO allegedly told employees to go work for another company. There's a difference about saying go to work for another company versus you can go to work for another company. The can means something there. So it wasn't threatening the employee's job. It was telling the employee, you have an option if you're not happy here. So this ruling came out just a couple of weeks ago by the National Labor Relations Board. And my strong hunch is that if Starbucks appeals this into the court system, this is never going to hold up. I think this is an administrative law judge's decision from the National Labor Relations Board, an NLRB judge who said that this was an unfair labor practice, a coercive statement. And like I said, again, if this gets appealed into the court systems, I don't think the courts would allow this to stand. This was not a threat, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to avoid, is threatening employees' jobs and employment working conditions because of their concerted activity, of course.
Exactly. If you tell an employee, if you're not happy here, you can go somewhere else, that's informing employees of their option. That's not threatening them with termination.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.